Like most people, I love buying new stuff. Electronic gadgets, especially portable computers, are my favorite toys, as you can tell. But the joy of getting a new laptop can quickly turn into disappointment. Manufacturers segment the market to increase sales margins, which makes their portfolio so complicated that even tech-savvy users may end up purchasing an inferior product for the given price. This sketchy strategy can be observed across all consumer electronics, but laptops belong to the most affected devices. I will split this rant into multiple chapters, so feel free to jump to the point of your interest. The top of the line, so-called halo products, charm potential buyers with all the bells and whistles, as the cost is not meant to be the primary deciding factor at this price point. We leave it at that. Nothing to see here. The more interesting are high-end products further down the line. They're still rather expensive and are often misused as anchors. Can you recall any GPU that seems to exist only to make other GPU models look more exciting? Like when nvidia unlaunched its 12GB version of RTX 4080 only to rename it to 4070 Ti after public backslash. The more expensive, real 16GB version of 4080 primarily existed to make the cheaper sibling look more attractive. How nice of her. AMD is not a saint in this regard either. Remember the launch price of RX 6800 XT versus 6900 XT. The price premium for 6900 XT was $250, despite the fact it was only slightly faster in gaming than 6800 XT. Nice try, both of you. Speaking of CPUs and GPUs, their naming conventions suck across the board. You plan to buy one thing, but accidentally end up buying another. All major manufacturers of processors, namely Intel, AMD, and nvidia, are guilty in this regard. First, unless one does their homework, they can't be sure what specific architecture with what TDP they're buying. Wrong choice can impact performance, battery life, or even nose profile. The bigger number doesn't always equal better, or in other words, the latest CPU generation may not necessarily contain the latest and greatest CPU cores. Take Ryzen 5000 series as an example. One would expect all CPUs in this series were based on Zen 3 architecture. But there were some mobile processors which were built with Zen 2 cores. AMD has actually started to make naming more transparent since the 7000 series, where the third digit of a CPU model indicates the generation of certain architecture, and the same applies to the suffix, which tells about the thermal design power. But you know what? This used to be the case until now. AMD is changing its naming convention with 6-point APUs once again. TDP of mobile CPUs and GPUs is not carved in stone anyway, so laptop manufacturers may still decide to go with a lower TDP, which makes the situation super nebulous. Though Intel mocked AMD for the deceptive naming scheme in the recent past, they had done the very same thing over and over. For example, with Ice Lake over Comet Lake. And who could forget about Skylake, where Intel got literally stuck at 40nm fabrication process for over 5 years and kept telling us excuses why the old architecture is new again. Just add a plus symbol to the node. Let's get over with that, right? Right? However, nvidia is the king of misleading naming schemes. I've mentioned their unlaunching of RTX 4080. As shameful as that marketing stunt was, it pales in comparison to them not differentiating between desktop and mobile GPUs in their naming conventions. The top offender is RTX 4090. The desktop and mobile variants are completely different GPUs with different core count, memory capacity, bus width, as well as the total graphics power. Why not adding a simple M suffix for mobile parts like they did back in good old days? But who am I to tell Jensen what to do? What about the integrated graphics, you ask? Those laptops come without a discrete GPU and thus rely solely on the integrated graphics. But these graphics processors used to suck extremely bad in the past. Intel's classic HD or UHDI GPU did the job of providing the display output, but that was about it. Forget any serious 3D or video hardware acceleration. And let's face it, Intel had zero motivation to do anything about this since there had been no competition in the mobile market for years. But when AMD came with their RDNA 2 based iGPU in Ryzen 6000 series, things suddenly started moving. Intel introduced its ARC-based integrated graphics inside Meteor Lake Core Ultra processors, and believe it or not, they no longer suck. In fact, these chips trade blows with AMD's integrated graphics solution, and that's great news for consumers. Now, I really wanted to avoid talking about AI, but I guess I'll have to, because normies often confuse both the terminology and the technology. Anyone out there dares to explain the difference between small and large language models or discriminative and generative AI? Everyone throws the AI buzzword here and there, and the term is so vague, people often mean completely different things. I can fully relate to the quote by Stephanie Doyle from the last year's Backblaze article. It's also important to note that these are new and changing terms in a new and changing landscape. Google's TPU was announced in 2015, just 8 years ago. I can't count the amount of conversation I've had that end in a hyperbolic impression of what AI is going to do for or to the world, and that's largely because people think that there is no limit to what it is. I mean, she nailed it. Dedicated NPUs or neural processing units have indeed existed in consumer-grade chips for almost a decade. Even my old Huawei smartphone, released in 2018, features a 16-bit NPU on its Kirin SoC for image recognition purposes. Based on what the chip can see, it tweaks color settings of the camera so the final picture would pop. Being a millennial, which means kinda old according to my Gen Z kids, I always prefer manual post-processing, as the smartphone often renders unrealistic looking images. But I guess that's what this Instagram generation wants. Or is it TikTok? Or Snapchat? Anyways, maybe I'm old after all. Another example is my robotic vacuum cleaner. It sports a Qualcomm SoC, which enables the vacuum cleaner to identify different obstacles such as extension cords, shoes, scales, or even dog poo, and avoid them. At least in theory. The results are somewhat inconsistent. Fortunately, I live in a pet-free home, so at least the poo part is mitigated by default. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not discouraging progress. NPUs do offer advantage in power efficiency for parallel processing with lower precision, which is sufficient for speech and image recognition, LLM inferencing, and the like. I just think silicon real estate is too expensive to be wasted with stuff we don't use very often. Whether you like it or not, we'll see dedicated NPU circuits in the next generation of CPUs. Intel says their quote, edge over competition will bring you AI PC, and it will quote, be a sea change moment in technical innovation. I mean, what? AMD doesn't want to be left behind, so their AMD Ryzen AI quote brings the power of personal computing closer to you on an AI PC, unlocking a whole new level of efficiencies for work, collaboration, and innovation so that you can stay connected better with the world around you. Boy, I'm so glad I was blessed to live long enough to watch this heavenly experience unfold before my very eyes. From what I can read on AMD's website, the only thing Ryzen AI can be used for at this point is to enable Windows Studio effects such as automatic pan and zoom, eye contact correction, or advanced background blur to enhance your video calls. This is exactly what is already available in nvidia Broadcast app, but this time you don't need a discrete GPU. This got me thinking, what craze does this AI nonsense remind me of? VR, of course. Virtual reality was supposed to be everywhere, and there was a VR-ready sticker on like every CPU out there. Back to our issues plaguing laptops though. Some manufacturers make laptops suck even more by providing insufficient cooling solution. For example, a single heat pipe shared between the CPU and a discrete GPU is a joke. Or have you seen intake vents that are too obstructed? The laptop will throttle and or sound like a jet engine. Unfortunately, this is a very common design flaw, and it affects even more premium models such as ThinkPads. Next, I intended to rant about 8GB of system memory capacity, but then I realized they still sell laptops with 4GB of RAM. Soldered to the motherboard, of course. Holy smoke! Whoever buys such laptop should lose the right to vote. Anyways, though I loathe soldered RAM chips, I can somehow understand their use in ultra-thin laptops. But why do many premium models stop existing gigabytes of memory then? Wait, Who wouldn't want a laptop with a slow, dim, washed out screen? Business laptops often come with these, and it's a complete bummer. Like this older HP EliteBook. And while 45% NTSC coverage as well as the top brightness of 250 nits is completely unacceptable, HP succeeded in making it even worse. When I unplug the power cord, the display gets dimmed automatically, and this feature cannot be disabled. Now it's challenging to use the laptop even indoors. Well done, HP! And please, don't get me started regarding build quality of the keyboard, touchpad, or the chassis itself. My homework is done, and now I know what components I want inside my new laptop. It can be hard to find all laptop models that fit my needs, right? It would be a piece of cake if only filters were not useless. And Amazon is truly amazing in this regard. The top menu is obviously not an option. Shop by department, computers and tablets, and no filter available. One has to search manually or scroll way down to be able to see any filter. The best filtering options I came across was Best Buy. I really like Newegg's website design, where I can select different CPU, RAM, SSD configurations right from the product detail page. Thumbs up. But forget about more advanced filtering such as CPU generation, TDP, display luminosity, color space, and the like. I could continue ranting for another hour. No worries, that's not my point. My intention was to draw attention to how frustrating a laptop shopping experience can be and how much effort a buyer must invest into doing research. One would think computers would be so commoditized by now that this is a no issue, but it is. My take on this: when shopping for a laptop, the single most important thing is to know what my primary use case is. A frequent, white-collar traveler needs a completely different laptop configuration than a gamer or a photographer. And that's fine. Just do not fall into a trap of becoming a fanboy of one specific brand, because the matter of fact is all manufacturers sell crappy models, but only a handful of manufacturers offer solid models at a reasonable price tag. And who knows? Perhaps one day a new hope may emerge in the CPU space and... oh snap, a dragon. Snapdragon X without the 86. Powered by